Miss Bennett. The court clerk's voice was almost apologetic. I'm so sorry. The judge is about to finish the last ceremony of the day. She hesitated before asking the question neither of us wanted to hear. Is your fiancé still coming? I looked at the digital clock mounted above the courtroom door. 4:57 p.m. I had been sitting beneath the same humming fluorescent lights since early morning. The bouquet resting beside my chair had already begun to wilt. Around me, the waiting room was almost empty. Every couple who had arrived after me had already been married. Some left laughing, some left crying. One elderly couple held hands as though they had waited 50 years for 15 minutes. And then there was me, still wearing the cream-colored dress Ethan once said he loved, still holding a marriage license that would expire before anyone ever signed it, still waiting. Again. 3 weeks earlier, Ethan Reed and I had stood together inside the Cook County Clerk's office. We filled out paperwork, verified our identification, paid the fee. The clerk smiled. Congratulations. See you both on your ceremony date. All we had to do was return. Stand before a judge. Say, I do. 15 minutes. That was all marriage required. Apparently. It required much more than Ethan was willing to give. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the second. The first courthouse ceremony, he missed because a research experiment supposedly couldn't be interrupted. I'm sorry. The cell cultures reacted unexpectedly. I couldn't leave. I believed him. Scientists dealt with unpredictable work. I understood. The second ceremony. One of his doctoral students had supposedly been injured in a highway accident. He called, sounding exhausted. I had no choice. Again, I believed him. Because love, or at least the version I thought was love, always searched for explanations before accepting disappointment. Today, there was no explanation, only silence. I unlocked my phone. The final message from Ethan had arrived at 9:12 a.m. Leaving the lab now, 20 minutes away. 20 minutes. 8 hours later, I was still alone. The clerk quietly placed a paper cup of water beside me. You don't have to wait anymore, she said gently. I looked at the unopened cup, then at the marriage license inside its folder. For years, I imagined heartbreak would feel dramatic. Tears, anger, desperation. Instead, it felt strangely quiet. Like reaching the end of a hallway you'd been walking down for years, only to discover there had never been a door. I slipped the marriage license back into the folder. No, I said softly. He's not coming. Outside, the downtown Chicago buzzed with its usual afternoon energy. People hurried toward trains, taxi horns echoed between buildings. Life continued. Completely unaware that somewhere inside the courthouse, a wedding had quietly died without ever beginning. I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I walked 6 blocks to Lakeshore Medical Center. 3 months earlier, my department had nominated me for one of the most competitive advanced surgical fellowships in the country, Pacific Crest Medical Center, Seattle. 3 years, advanced minimally invasive surgery, faculty development, research, leadership training, the opportunity surgeons dreamed about. I had almost turned it down, not because I didn't want it, because Ethan didn't want to leave Chicago. Somehow, his preference had slowly become our decision. My department chair looked surprised when I entered his office without an appointment. You look exhausted, he said. I need the acceptance papers. He blinked. I thought you declined. I changed my mind. He pulled the file from a cabinet. The program starts in 6 weeks. I know. You told me you planned to stay after the wedding. I signed my name across the final page before he even finished speaking. There won't be a wedding. The room fell silent. He looked at me carefully, not with curiosity, with concern. Have you discussed this with Ethan? I placed the pen on his desk. This is my career. I don't need permission to choose it. He studied me for several seconds, then quietly signed beneath my name. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words almost made me cry, not because they were extraordinary, because I'd spent so long hearing what I should sacrifice that I'd forgotten what support sounded like. When I stepped outside, the cold Chicago wind stung my face. I stood on the hospital steps, holding the acceptance letter. For the first time in 4 years. I made a decision without wondering whether Ethan would approve. The feeling was unfamiliar, almost frightening, but beneath the fear, something else slowly appeared. Freedom. Ethan arrived home shortly after 10 that night. He walked through the apartment carrying a small blue jewelry bag. Without saying hello, he placed it on the kitchen island. Something came up at the lab. He loosened his tie. This is to make up for today. He tapped the gift bag lightly. We'll reschedule the courthouse. Not. I'm sorry you waited. Not. How long were you there? Not. Are you okay? Just another promise, another replacement, another future date. As though disappointment could always be postponed. He headed toward the bathroom. I'll shower. We'll talk afterward. The bathroom door closed. Water began running. I stared at the unopened gift. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Sophia Lane. No text, only a video. Sophia had once been Ethan's research partner. Long before she became that, she had been the woman he'd loved. Or at least, the woman everyone quietly suspected he'd never stopped loving. I pressed play. The recording showed the employee lounge inside Ethan's research building. Sophia sat on a couch. His suit jacket rested over her shoulders. Ethan knelt in front of her, carefully adjusting the medication she kept for her heart condition. She smiled down at him. Are you really going to marry Claire? A long silence. Then she whispered, You've always loved me. Ethan never answered. He didn't need to. The way he looked at her said everything his words never had. Sophia leaned forward, kissed him. For less than a heartbeat, he hesitated. Then he reached behind her neck and kissed her back. The video ended. Outside the bathroom, the shower was still running. Inside the apartment, everything suddenly made perfect sense. I walked to the kitchen wall. Hanging beside the refrigerator was a small paper countdown calendar every morning. I'd crossed off another day until our wedding. I picked up a marker, crossed out today's number, then wrote a new one. 29. Not 29 days until I married Ethan Reed. 29 days until I left him forever. 29 days. That was all I gave myself. 29 days to untangle 4 years of a life I had built around someone who had never truly made room for me. Not 29 days to change Ethan. Not 29 days to win him back. 29 days to remember who I had been before every dream became a negotiation. The next morning, Ethan acted as though the previous day had never happened. He poured coffee, checked emails on his tablet, read through research notes while eating breakfast. Finally, he glanced toward me. You didn't open the gift. I looked at the blue jewelry bag still sitting on the kitchen island. No, you should. It took me forever to find. His voice was light, almost cheerful, as though a bracelet could erase an empty courtroom. I slid the bag back toward him. I don't need jewelry. He frowned. You're still upset. I waited 8 hours. I told you something came up. No, I answered quietly. You told me that after it was already over. He sighed. You know how clinical trials work. I know how priorities work. For the first time, he looked irritated instead of apologetic. You always make it sound like I wanted this. I wanted you, I replied, for 15 minutes. Silence. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Sophia. He declined the call, but only after reading the message. I noticed. So did he. Neither of us mentioned it. Some truths had already become too obvious to deny. That afternoon, I stopped by a bridal boutique, not to shop, to cancel. The consultant recognized me immediately. Dr. Bennett, we've finished your final alterations. She smiled warmly. You'll look beautiful. I placed the garment bag receipt on the counter. I won't need the dress. Her smile slowly disappeared. Oh, I'm so sorry. No refund? I asked. She shook her head gently. The alterations were completed weeks ago. I nodded. It's okay. She carefully unzipped the garment bag one last time. The dress looked exactly as I'd imagined. Elegant, simple, everything I'd wanted. Just for the wrong future. I hope, the consultant whispered, whoever wears this someday is truly cherished. I smiled sadly. So do I. Then I walked away, leaving the dress behind. 3 days later, it was my 34th birthday. For years, Ethan had insisted birthdays deserved elaborate celebrations. He always planned expensive dinners, luxury hotels, reservations months in advance. This year, that he forgot. Not completely. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. Happy birthday. Crazy day at the lab. Dinner tomorrow? I stared at the message, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because somehow I'd stopped expecting anything different. That evening, my closest friends insisted on taking me out instead. A small Italian restaurant, good food, simple conversation. Halfway through dinner, my phone rang again. One of Ethan's colleagues. I answered. Dr. Bennett? Yes. I thought you might want to know. Ethan's at the Symphony Hall fundraiser tonight. I frowned. I thought he was working. So did everyone. The call ended. No explanation. Curiosity, or maybe self-respect, led me there. The concert had already begun. Guests filled the elegant lobby during intermission. I spotted Ethan almost immediately, not because he stood out, because he looked happier than I'd seen him in months. Sophia stood beside him, laughing. His hand rested lightly against the middle of her back. The gesture was natural, comfortable, practiced, not something people accidentally do. I stayed hidden behind one of the marble columns. Then I heard her. You missed something important today. Sophia smiled. I know. You always choose me anyway. Ethan didn't argue. He simply smiled. Again. Silence answered louder than words. I turned around before they could see me. Some conversations don't need to be finished. When I arrived home, Ethan was already there. He looked surprised. I thought you were out. I was. I brought cake. He pointed toward a bakery box on the table. Happy birthday. I looked at the untouched candles. When did you buy it? On the way home. From the fundraiser? His expression changed instantly. What fundraiser? The one with Sophia. A long pause. It was work. Everything is work, I replied. The courthouse, birthdays, concerts, her. It's always work. He rubbed his forehead. You're overthinking this. I watched her kiss you. The words hung between us. His face lost all color. You saw that? I saw enough. He opened his mouth, closed it again. For nearly a minute, he couldn't find a single sentence. Finally, I never meant to hurt you. No, I answered softly. You just kept choosing the thing that hurt me. That night, I opened my laptop, confirmed my acceptance to Seattle, booked a one-way flight, reserved temporary housing near Pacific Crest Medical Center. Every confirmation email that arrived felt strangely peaceful. One click, then another. The future I'd postponed for years began taking shape in less than an hour. The countdown calendar became my quiet ritual. 26, 25, 24. Each morning, I crossed off another number. Ethan noticed it eventually. "What's the countdown for?" I smiled faintly. "You'll find out." He assumed it was another wedding date. He never asked again. He never imagined. He wasn't counting down to a ceremony. He was counting down to the day he would come home and find the apartment completely empty. At the airport, my boarding pass finally appeared on the departure screen. Seattle, on time. I tightened my grip on the handle of my suitcase, then took one last look at the city where I'd spent 4 years waiting for someone who never arrived. When the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, I didn't look back. I didn't look back. Not at the terminal, not at my phone, not at the life I'd spent 4 years trying to save by myself. As the plane lifted above Chicago, I watched the city disappear beneath the clouds for the first time in years. My future no longer depended on whether Ethan Reed chose me. Seattle greeted me with gray skies and steady rain. Pacific Crest Medical Center towered above the waterfront, all glass and steel, overlooking Elliott Bay. Everything felt unfamiliar. New hospital, new apartment, new coworkers, new beginning. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like breathing after holding my breath for far too long. Orientation lasted 3 exhausting days. Hospital policies, operating room protocols, research expectations, licensing paperwork, credential verification. The information never seemed to end. By the 4th afternoon, my brain felt completely overloaded. I stopped at a small coffee shop across from the hospital before walking home. The line stretched almost to the door. As I reached the register, someone tugged gently on my coat sleeve. I turned. A little girl stood there clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear sewn back on by hand. She couldn't have been older than 7. She looked up at me with enormous brown eyes. "Excuse me. My bunny is sick." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" She held up the rabbit. "You look like a doctor." "I think he needs one, despite everything." I laughed. "A very serious case?" She nodded dramatically. "Very serious." I gently examined the rabbit. I think he'll survive." The little girl smiled with complete relief. "I knew you'd know." A man's voice interrupted us. "Lily." A tall man hurried across the cafe, carrying 2 paper cups. "I'm sorry. I turned around for 1 second. He stopped when he saw me. His expression shifted from concern to embarrassment. "I hope she wasn't bothering you." "Not at all," I smiled. "We just saved her rabbit." The little girl grinned proudly. "I told you doctors fix everything." The man laughed softly. "I wish that were true." He extended his hand. "Adrian Cole. Clare Bennett." For a brief second, his expression changed. "Pacific Crest?" I nodded. "You too?" "I'm in pediatric cardiac surgery." He smiled warmly. "Welcome to Seattle." Over the next 2 weeks, our paths crossed almost every day. Sometimes in the cafeteria, sometimes outside the elevators, sometimes while grabbing coffee before dawn surgeries. Adrian never lingered longer than a few minutes, never asked personal questions, never tried too hard. He simply treated everyone around him with effortless respect. One morning, He noticed I was carrying 3 heavy surgical textbooks. Without saying a word, he took 2 of them. "I've got these." "You don't have to." "I know," he answered. "I wanted to." The gesture lasted less than 30 seconds, yet somehow, it stayed with me all day. Lily quickly decided we were friends. Whenever she visited the hospital after school, she searched every hallway until she found me. "Doctor, Claire," she'd shout excitedly, "I brought Mr. Whiskers." The patched rabbit always needed another imaginary surgery. Adrian apologized every single time. "You don't have to keep entertaining her." I smiled. "I think she's keeping me entertained." Lily laughed. "I like this doctor." "So do I," Adrian admitted quietly, then immediately looked embarrassed by his own honesty. One rainy evening, the 3 of us stopped at a small diner after work. Lily happily colored pictures, while Adrian and I waited for dinner. "I should probably warn you," he said. "I'm not very good at first impressions." I laughed. "I don't believe that." "I was. My wife usually handled that." The word caught me off guard. "Wife?" He nodded. "Emily. She passed away 3 years ago." His voice remained calm, but grief still lived quietly beneath every syllable. "Lily was 4. "I'm sorry." "So am I." He smiled sadly. "But Lily reminds me every day that life keeps moving." I looked across the booth. The little girl was humming softly while drawing 3 stick figures holding hands. One of them looked suspiciously like me. Weeks became months. My surgical fellowship grew more demanding. Long shifts, emergency cases, research deadlines. Some nights I barely made it home before midnight. Yet somehow, Seattle no longer felt lonely. George occasionally called just to ask how I was doing. Emma. No. That chapter of my life was over. I smiled to myself. Even now, my mind still expected Ethan's world. Instead, I had colleagues who respected me, patients who trusted me, and a little girl who insisted I was the best rabbit doctor in Washington. One Saturday afternoon, Lily arrived at my apartment carrying a homemade apple pie. Adrian followed behind her, looking apologetic. "She insisted." "I told her we shouldn't bother you." Lily rolled her eyes dramatically. "Dad worries too much." She marched into my kitchen. "I'm helping." Adrian sighed. "I've already lost that argument." The 3 of us spent the afternoon baking cookies. Flour somehow ended up everywhere except the mixing bowl. Lily laughed until she nearly fell off her chair. Watching them, something inside me softened. This wasn't excitement or passion. It was peace, the kind I'd spent years searching for without realizing it. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, Adrian quietly covered her with a blanket, then turned toward me. "I need to ask you something." His voice was unusually serious. I felt my heartbeat quicken. He hesitated for several seconds, then finally spoke. "My mother doesn't know how sick she is." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Advanced heart failure," he answered quietly. "The doctors don't think she has much time." I remained silent. He continued. "Her only wish is to see Lily grow up in a complete family again." He looked down at the floor. "I've been trying to figure out how to give her that." Then he met my eyes. "And I think I have an impossible question to ask you." "And I think I have an impossible question to ask you." Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Rain tapped softly against the apartment windows. Lily slept peacefully on the couch, still clutching her patched rabbit. I looked at Adrienne. "What kind of question?" He exhaled slowly. "My mother believes the only thing keeping her alive is the hope that Lily will grow up with a family again." I stayed quiet. I've tried explaining that life doesn't always work that way. She smiles. She agrees. And the next day, she asks if I've met anyone. A tired laugh escaped him. I've run out of answers. He looked genuinely uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. I know this sounds ridiculous. I know we haven't known each other very long. I also know you don't owe me anything. He paused. So, if the answer is no... Yeah, I'll never bring it up again. I nodded gently. Go on. What if... we got married? Silence. Not romantic silence. Shock, the kind that steals every thought from your mind. Adrian immediately raised both hands. Not because I expect a relationship. Not because I'm asking you to replace Emily. And definitely not because I want to pressure you. He looked toward Lily. I want my mother to leave this world believing Lily won't grow up alone. I stared at him. You can't be serious. I am. You barely know me. I know enough, he answered quietly. I know you're kind. I know Lily trusts you. I know I've never seen you treat another person with anything except respect. He smiled sadly. And honestly, those things matter more than how long we've known each other. I stood and walked toward the window. Seattle's lights blurred through the rain. A few months earlier, someone else had asked me to wait. Again. And again. And again. Now, another man was asking me to make the biggest decision of my life. The difference was, one had always asked me to sacrifice for his future. The other was asking because he was trying to protect someone else's. I can't pretend to love you, I said finally. I'm not asking you to. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for another relationship. I understand. I don't even know if I trust my own judgment anymore. He nodded. I understand that too. There wasn't a trace of disappointment in his voice, only patience. So, I asked, what exactly are you proposing? Adrian reached into his briefcase. Not a ring, not flowers, a folder. He handed it to me. Inside was a neatly typed agreement. Simple, clear, respectful. A civil marriage, separate finances, independent careers. Either of us could end the arrangement whenever we chose. No hidden clauses, no manipulation. At the very bottom, one handwritten sentence had been added. If this arrangement ever causes you pain, I will sign divorce papers immediately. I read it twice, then looked back at him. You wrote that? I did. Why? Because you've already been hurt enough. The following afternoon, I visited Adrian's mother. Margaret Cole rested beside a large hospital window overlooking Elliott Bay. She looked frail, but her smile filled the room. So, she teased gently, you're the surgeon Lily won't stop talking about. I laughed. I guess I am. Margaret reached for my hand. My granddaughter hasn't smiled this much since Emily died. She glanced toward Adrian. Neither has my son. Neither of them knew about our conversation the night before. Watching them together, I finally understood why he'd asked. It had never been about appearances. It had been about giving his family hope. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment reading the agreement again. Every page respected my choices. Every paragraph protected my independence. No demands, no pressure, no deadlines, just one unusual offer made with complete honesty. My phone buzzed. Ethan, can we talk? I stared at the message, then locked the screen without replying. For months, I'd begged him for conversations. Now, I no longer owed him one. 2 days later, I met Adrian outside the courthouse. The irony wasn't lost on me. The last time I'd stood outside a courthouse, I'd spent 8 hours waiting for someone who never arrived. This time, someone was already there before I was, holding 2 cups of coffee. He smiled when he saw me. I wasn't sure if you'd come. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. He didn't ask again, didn't persuade me, didn't convince me. He simply waited, giving me room to choose. I looked at the courthouse doors, then back at him. If we do this, I need one promise. Anything. If either of us falls in love with someone else, we end this honestly. No lies. No guilt. No staying because we feel obligated. Adrien nodded immediately. I promise. And one more thing, I added. Lily never finds out this started as an agreement. His eyes softened. She deserves to believe she's surrounded by people who chose her. We are, he answered quietly. In different ways, but we are. I smiled for what felt like the first genuine smile in years. Okay. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Okay. Let's give your mother some peace. He didn't celebrate, didn't cheer, didn't hug me. Instead, he simply opened the courthouse door, then stepped aside, waiting for me to walk through first. It was such a small gesture, yet somehow, it told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man he was. Together, we walked inside, not because we'd fallen in love, but because sometimes the healthiest relationships begin with 2 people choosing honesty before they choose each other. Together, we walked inside, not because we'd fallen in love, but because we had chosen honesty. 2 weeks later, Judge Eleanor Watkins signed the final document. Congratulations, she smiled warmly. I wish you both every happiness. Adrian thanked her politely. I managed a small smile. Neither of us corrected her. Some truths needed time to become real. Margaret cried the moment she saw the marriage certificate. Not loud tears, quiet ones. The kind that come after carrying fear for far too long. She reached for both our hands. I knew. You two would find each other. Adrian glanced at me. I squeezed his hand gently. For her, nothing more. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Living together turned out to be surprisingly easy. There were no dramatic adjustments, no arguments about space, no awkward expectations. Adrian cooked breakfast every morning because he woke before sunrise. I made coffee because he somehow managed to burn it every single time. Lily decided our apartment needed a weekly movie night. By the end of the first month, Friday evenings belonged to animated films, popcorn, and one patched rabbit named Mr. Whiskers. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was beginning to feel like one I'd chosen. One Saturday morning, I found Adrian assembling a bicycle in the garage. Lily bounced excitedly beside him. Don't tell her, he whispered. It's her birthday present. I laughed. You've been reading the instructions upside down. He looked down. I was wondering why this wheel wouldn't fit. For nearly an hour, we struggled together. Bolts rolled across the floor, tools disappeared. Lily nearly caught us twice. When the bicycle was finally finished, Adrian leaned against the wall and smiled. I perform heart surgery. But this thing almost defeated me. I laughed so hard, I had tears in my eyes. Lily's birthday party filled the backyard with neighbors, balloons, and children. When she saw the bicycle, she froze, then ran straight into Adrian's arms. You remembered. He hugged her tightly. I'll always remember. Watching them together, something shifted inside me. Not because of grand gestures, because of consistency. Adrien never forgot the little things, the promises, the school projects, the bedtime stories, the dentist appointments. He showed love the same way he breathed, quietly, every day. A month later, Margaret passed away peacefully. She left the world holding Lily's hand, while Adrian and I stood beside her bed. Her final smile carried no fear, only peace. After the funeral, the house felt unbearably quiet. Adrian spent hours sitting alone on the back porch. One evening, I found him there staring into the sunset. "I keep reaching for my phone," he admitted, "to call her. I know she's gone, but part of me still forgets." I sat beside him. Neither of us spoke. Sometimes grief doesn't ask for answers, only company. Without thinking, I reached for his hand. This time, it wasn't for Margaret. It wasn't part of an agreement. It was simply because he shouldn't have to carry that moment alone. He looked at our hands, then quietly intertwined his fingers with mine. Neither of us pulled away. 3 months later, an envelope arrived from Chicago. I recognized Ethan's handwriting immediately. Inside were divorce papers, already signed. Attached was a handwritten letter. "I spent years believing you'd always wait. I didn't realize I'd taught you how to leave instead. I'm sorry. No excuses, no explanations, just regret." I read the letter once, then folded it carefully. Adriel never asked what it said. He simply placed 2 mugs of tea on the table. "You don't have to tell me," he said. "I know," I answered, "but I want to." For the next hour, I told him everything. The courthouse, the birthdays, the missed promises, the video, the countdown calendar. He never interrupted, never criticized Ethan, never told me I should have left sooner. He only listened. When I finally finished, he spoke quietly. "You deserve to be chosen," without having to compete for someone's attention. Those words broke something inside me. Not painfully, gently, like a knot that had finally loosened after years. A week later, I signed the divorce papers, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just acceptance. One chapter had finally ended. That evening, Lily came running into the kitchen carrying a school permission slip. "They want someone to come for Family Day." She looked between us. "So, which one of you is taking the afternoon off?" Adrian smiled. "I can move surgeries." I shook my head. I already rearranged my schedule. Lily frowned dramatically. "Then both of you have to come." Adrian looked at me. I looked back at him. Then we both laughed. "Deal." Lily threw her arms around both of us. "I knew you'd say yes." Watching her run back upstairs, Adrian smiled quietly. "You know," he said, "I don't think we're pretending anymore." Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. An email from Chicago. Midwest Medical Foundation Annual Gala Guest Speaker, Dr. Ethan Reed. Special recognition for collaborative medical research. At the bottom of the invitation, one handwritten note had been added. "Claire, please come. There's something everyone deserves to know." I stared at the screen. For the first time in months, the past had come looking for me. For the first time in months, the past had come looking for me. I stared at the invitation for a long time. Adrian quietly set another cup of tea beside me. "You don't have to go," he said. "I know," I answered. "But if I don't, I'll always wonder why he asked." Adrian nodded. "Then go. No matter what happens, you won't be going alone." 1 week later, Chicago welcomed us with the cold autumn wind I'd once known so well. The Midwest Medical Foundation Gala occupied the grand ballroom of the Palmer House. Surgeons, researchers, hospital executives, medical students. Nearly everyone in the room recognized Ethan Reed. He stood near the stage, speaking with donors. For a brief moment, our eyes met. He froze, then slowly walked toward me. You came. I said I would. His gaze shifted toward Adrien. And this is... My husband, I answered calmly. Adrien offered his hand. Ethan. Adrien. The handshake lasted only a second. No hostility, no competition. Just two men acknowledging each other. Ethan quietly withdrew his hand. I'd like to talk after the presentation. We'll see, I replied. The ballroom lights dimmed. The foundation president stepped onto the stage. After welcoming the guests, he invited Ethan to receive the organization's annual award for excellence in medical research. Applause filled the room. Ethan accepted the crystal trophy. But instead of beginning his prepared speech, he looked directly toward me. I owe someone the truth. The room grew silent for years. I believed saving lives inside a laboratory excused every promise I broke outside it. He smiled sadly. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, family dinners, and he took a slow breath. Our wedding. People exchanged confused glances. He continued. The woman I asked to marry me waited 8 hours for me in a courthouse. I never arrived. Silence spread across the ballroom. No one touched their wine. No one whispered. I spent years telling myself I'd make it up to her tomorrow. But tomorrow became another tomorrow. And eventually, she stopped waiting. His voice shook for the first time. I blamed work. I blamed responsibility. I blamed circumstances. The truth, he looked down at the award in his hands, was that I expected her love to be permanent. I thought she'd always forgive me. I never realized every broken promise teaches someone how to live without you. Across the ballroom, Sophia lowered her eyes. She already knew where this was going. Ethan continued. There is one more truth. He looked toward the audience. The day I missed our final courthouse ceremony, I wasn't in the laboratory. A murmur spread across the room. I was with someone from my past. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But intentions don't erase betrayal. I failed the woman who trusted me most. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm only asking that no one here ever uses ambition, but as an excuse to neglect the people waiting at home. The ballroom erupted into applause, not because he'd redeemed himself, because he'd finally stopped lying. When the ceremony ended, Sophia quietly approached Ethan. He really did it, she said. He nodded. I should have done it years ago. She smiled sadly. I think we spent too long holding on to a version of each other that no longer existed. Without another word, she walked away. Neither of them tried to stop the other. Some endings don't need another argument, only acceptance. Outside the ballroom, Ethan found me standing on the terrace overlooking downtown Chicago. I owe you more than an apology, he said quietly. You don't owe me anything anymore, I answered. I wanted you to hear it from me. I know. He looked toward the city lights. I kept thinking, if I worked a little harder, everything else could wait. But love, he laughed bitterly, doesn't survive on postponed promises. No, I replied. It doesn't. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. The original marriage license application. Still unsigned, still carrying both our names. I kept it, he admitted. I couldn't throw it away. I looked at the faded document, then gently pushed it back toward him. Keep it, not because I want the past, but because I hope it reminds you that the people who love you should never become the appointments you keep rescheduling. He nodded. I'll remember. For the first time in years, We smiled at each other, not as people still in love, as two strangers who had finally forgiven the past enough to leave it there. As Adrienne and I walked back toward the hotel, he didn't ask what had been said. Instead, he simply slipped his hand into mine, comfortably, naturally, the way he'd done hundreds of times without asking for anything in return. I stopped walking. He looked at me. "What is it?" I smiled. "When we got married, it started as an agreement." He laughed softly. "I remember." "I don't." He blinked. "What?" "I don't remember the agreement anymore. I only remember the man who showed up every morning, every promise, every ordinary day." His eyes glistened. "Claire." I reached into my purse, pulled out the copy of our civil marriage agreement, then slowly tore it in half. The pages drifted into the night breeze. "We don't need this anymore," I whispered. He wrapped his arms around me, not dramatically, not desperately, just like coming home. 1 year later, the pediatric garden outside Pacific Crest Medical Center overflowed with flowers planted by children recovering from heart surgery. Lily raced between the colorful pathways holding Mister, whiskers high above her head. "Mom," she called. "Dad!" "Hurry up," Adrienne laughed. "We're coming." I looked at him, then at Lily, then at the small brass plaque beside the garden entrance, dedicated to the families who prove that love is measured not by perfect beginnings, but by the promises they choose to keep every single day. I smiled. Years earlier, I'd stood alone in a courthouse, waiting for someone who never came. Now, without ever planning it, I had found something infinitely more precious than the wedding I'd lost. Not perfection, not fairy tales, just a man who kept showing up, day after day. And in the end, that was the love story worth waiting for.